Tarraco is the ancient name of the current city of Tarragona. It was the oldest Roman settlement on the Iberian Peninsula, founded during the Second Punic War by Scipio Calvus, and became capital of the Roman province of Hispania Citerior, and of Hispania Tarraconensis during the Roman Empire. In 2000, the archaeological ensemble of Tarraco was declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. Origins and the Second Punic War. The municipality was inhabited in pre-Roman times by Iberians who had commercial contacts with the Greeks and Phoenicians who settled on the coast. The Iberian colonies were mainly located in the Ebro Valley. Evidence of Iberian colonies in the municipality of Tarragona has been dated to the 5th century BC. References in the literature to the presence of Iberians in Tarraco are ambiguous. Livy mentions an Oppidum called Cissus, and Polybius talks about a polis called Kissa. Tarraco is mentioned for first time shortly after the arrival of Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio Calvus at Emperies in 218 BC at the start of the Second Punic War, which began the Roman conquest of Hispania. Livy writes that the Romans conquered a field of Punics, applies for Hannibal's troops near Cissus, and took the city. A short time later, the Romans were attacked not far from Tarraco, but it remains unclear whether Cissus and Tarraco were the same city. A coin found in Emperies bears the inscription Tarracone Sala. The coin, engraved in keeping with other Emperies models at an undisclosed location, is generally dated to 250 BC, certainly before the arrival of the Romans. The name Kessa appears on coins of Iberian origin from the 1st and 2nd century BC that were marked according to Roman weight standards. Kessa may be equated with Cissus, the place of origin of the Cissesians mentioned by Pliny. In 217 BC, reinforcements arrived from Italy under the command of Publius Scipio, and he and his brother Gnaeus Cornelius are attributed with the fortification of Tarraco and the establishment of a military port. And as Pliny the Elder said, Tarraco Scipionum opus. Tarraco was work by the Scipios as Carthage was by the Carthaginians. The Roman city wall was probably constructed on top of the more ancient wall characteristic of the Iberian stonemason. After the death of the Scipio brothers, Tarraco was 25-year-old Scipio Africanus's winter base between 211 and 210, and where he met the tribes of Hispania and Conventis. The population was largely loyal to the Romans during the war. Livy called them allies and friends of the Roman people, and the fishermen of Tarraco served with the boats during the siege of Carthago Nova. The conquest of the Iberian Peninsula by the Romans took over 200 years. Tarraco during the Roman Republic. During the following 2 centuries, Tarraco remained a supply and winter base camp during the wars against the Celtiberians, as it was during the Second Punic War. There was therefore a strong military presence during this period, possibly in the highest area of what is currently the city's historic quarter, called the Part Alta. In 197 BC, all of the conquered areas, even narrow strips along the coast of Spain, were divided between the new provinces of Hispania Ulterior and Hispania Citerior. The capital of Hispania Citerior was principally Carthago Nova, but Strabo says that the governors also resided in Tarraco. The legal status of Tarraco is not entirely clear. It was probably organized as Conventus Civium Romanorum during the Republic, with 2 magistri at its head. Gaius Porcius Cato, consul in the year 114 BC, chose Tarraco as the place of his exile in the year 108, indicating that Tarraco was a free city or perhaps an ally at the time. According to Strabo, one of the most recent of the Roman battles took place not far from Tarraco, when Caesar conquered supporters of Pompey in 49 BC in Ilerda. Tarraco supported his army with food. It is not entirely clear whether Tarraco received received the status of colony at the hand of Julius Caesar or Augustus. The current research tends to assume that was the former who granted it after his victory in Munda around the year 45 BC, and reflected in the epithet Lulia in its formal name, Colonia Lulia urbs triumphalis Tarraco, which would remain for the duration of the empire. The period of Augustus. In 27 BC, Emperor Augustus went to Spain to monitor the campaigns in Cantabria. However, due to his poor health he preferred to stay in Tarraco. Apparently, Augustus had built an altar in the city, and a story by the rhetorician Quintilian mentions that the inhabitants of Tarraco complained to Augustus that a palm tree had grown on the altar. He replied that would mean it was not used very often. Soon after he arrived, the old Via Herculia became the Via Augusta. A milestone found in Tarragona's Placa de Braus mentions the road between 12 and 06 BC, leading to Barcino to the northeast and Dertosa, Saguntum to the south. The city flourished under Augustus. The writer Pomponius Mela describes it in the 1st century AD as follows: Tarraco is the richest port on this coast. Tarraco under Augustus and Tiberius minted its own coins with depictions of the imperial cult and the inscription CVT, CVTTO, CVTTAR. After the death of Augustus in the year 14 AD, the emperor was officially deified, and in 15 AD a temple was erected in his honor, probably in the easternmost neighborhood of the city and near the colonial forum, as mentioned by Tacitus in his Annal. The city during the High Empire. In 68 AD, Galba, who lived in Tarraco for 8 years, was proclaimed emperor in Clunia Sulpicia. Vespasian began a reorganization of the precarious finances of the state. According to Pliny, this allowed Latin citizenship to be granted to the inhabitants of Hispania. The Spanish territory, which since ancient times consisted of urban areas and a land divided by tribal organizations, was transformed into areas organized around urban centers, whether in colonies or municipalities, thereby facilitating tax collection. A rapid increase in construction took place, possibly due to the reorganization of the province. The amphitheater, the temple area and the provincial forum at the top of the city were probably built during this period. Most of the statues at these locations were probably placed there between 70 and 180 AD. The patron of the city, Senator Lucius Licinius Sura, was appointed under the Emperor Trajan. Sura came from Tarraconensis and reached one of the highest offices of state. In the winter 122-123 AD, Hadrian is thought to have visited the city to hold a conventus for Hispania. He also rebuilt the Temple of Augustus. Tarraco started experiencing severe economic difficulties at the end of the 2nd century AD. Few statues were built in honor of the city, probably due to a lack of funds. This period also saw the defeat of the struggle against the Emperor Claudius Albinus, who was supported by the governor of Tarraconensis Novio, Lucius Rufa. At this time, inscriptions dedicated to Provincia e Concilium start to disappear, to be increasingly replaced by inscriptions dedicated to members of the military. There started being fewer influential merchants in the Ordo Decurionum and more patroni. Severus rebuilt the Temple of Augustus in the amphitheater, as evidenced by an inscription at the bottom. The Low Empire. After the imperial administration reforms of Diocletian, the peninsula became a diocese divided into 6 provinces that were much smaller than before. Tarraco remained the capital, but of a much smaller province. The buildings destroyed during the invasion of the Franks were slowly rebuilt or replaced by new ones. A portico of Jupiter was built between Diocletian and Maximian, which may be part of a basilica. In in 476. Following the collapse of Roman defences along the Rhine, Tarraco was occupied by the Visigoths and King Europe. There is no evidence of destruction, and apparently the capture of the city was relatively quiet. The Visigoths probably took over existing structures by establishing a small group of nobles, which the existence of Christian tombs in this period seems to confirm. The end of the ancient history of the city came with the arrival of the Muslims in 713–714. Archaeological ensemble. The archaeological ensemble of Tarraco is one of the largest archaeological sites of Roman Hispania preserved in Spain today. It was declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 2000. The city of Tarraco is the oldest Roman settlement on the Iberian Peninsula, having become the capital of the province of Hispania Citerior in the 1st century BC. There are still many important Roman ruins in Tarragona. Part of the foundations of the large Cyclopean walls near the pilot's offices are believed to be of pre-Roman origins. This building, which was a prison in the 19th century, is said to be the Palace of Augustus. Tarraco, like many ancient cities, has remained inhabited, and has been slowly dismantled by its own citizens for building materials. In spite of this, although amphitheatre near the seashore was long used as a quarry, large parts of its structure have survived. It was built after the circus, and measures 45.72 meters long, although some sections of it may still be undocumented. Inscriptions on the stones of houses written in Latin and even in Phoenician can be found throughout the city. Two ancient monuments a small distance from the city have aged well. The first is a magnificent aqueduct, which crosses a valley 1.5 kilometers from the city gates. It is 21 meters long, and its lower arches, of which there are 2 rows, are almost 3 meters tall. The other monument to the northwest of the city, and also about 1.5 kilometers from it, is a Roman tomb, which is usually called Tor dels Scipions, although there is no evidence to suggest that the Scipio brothers were buried there. Criteria UNESCO included the ruins of the ancient Roman city of Tarraco that on its list of World Heritage Sites because they meet 2 criteria. Criterion E. The Roman remains of Tarraco are of exceptional importance in the Roman development of planning and urban design and served as model for provincial capitals elsewhere in the world. Criterion E. Tarraco provides an eloquent and unparalleled testimony in the history of the Mediterranean lands in the ancient times.